The docking bay of Xylos Prime smelled of ozone, burning coolant and fear. Kalen Voss didn't recognize the fear as his own at first. He was too busy inventorying the crates of medical supplies he'd just offloaded, 37 units of synth blood, 12 portable sterilizers, and a crate of pediatric antibiotics that had cost him 3 months of profit margins. The Vorni refugees in the outer colonies needed them. He needed the payment. Then the lights cut out. Emergency beacons painted the bay in pools in crimson. Kalen's hand moved to his belt knife on instinct, a habit from years of trading in places where deals were settled with blades instead of credits. He heard boots, dozens of them, rhythmic, synchronized, predatory. By order of the Xylothian Royal Tribunal, you will kneel. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Kalen turned slowly, his boots squeaking on the polished deck. What he saw made his stomach drop. Royal Praetorians, at least 20 of them, their crystalline armor refracting the red light into 1,000 bleeding shards. Each one held a plasma pike aimed at his chest. Behind them, a holographic projection flickered to life. The face of Commander Thraxus, head of the Royal Guard, his scaled features twisted with contempt. "Human traitor Kalen Voss," Thraxus intoned. "You are charged with the abduction of Her Royal Highness Princess Alara Vel, heir to the Xylothian throne. Confess now, and your death will be swift." Kalen blinked. "I've never even seen your princess." "Lies." Thraxus's image stepped closer, pixelating at the edges. "You were identified by 3 witnesses. Your ship was tracked to this location. The princess's biosignature is aboard your vessel at this very moment." Ice water flooded Kalen's veins. He turned to look at his ship, the Wandering Star, its loading ramp still lowered. Someone had been inside. Someone had. "Search the vessel," Thraxus commanded. 2 Praetorians broke formation and climbed the ramp. Kalen stood frozen, mind racing through possibilities. A setup, a smuggling frame, political infighting. He'd heard rumors of factions within the royal court who wanted the princess dead, but putting her on a human ship, that was either brilliant or insane. A minute passed, too. Then a sound came from inside the Wandering Star, a small, frightened cry. The Praetorians emerged with a child between them. She couldn't have been more than 6 standard cycles old, her silver-scaled face streaked with tears, her royal crest gleaming dully in the emergency light. She wore no shoes. Her ceremonial robes were torn. "Princess Alara." "No," Kalen shouted, stepping forward. "I didn't take her. I don't know how she got." A plasma pike slammed into his stomach. He hit the deck hard, air exploding from his lungs. The Praetorians closed in, magnetic cuffs snapping around his wrists. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the princess's cries grow louder. "Let go of her," Kalen managed. "She's scared, you're scaring her." Commander Thraxus materialized through the hologram, stepping into the bay with cold precision. He looked down at Kalen the way someone might look at garbage. "You dare speak of her welfare? You, who stole her from her bed?" Kalen's face pressed against the cold deck. He could see the princess now, squirming between the 2 Praetorians who held her arms. Her violet eyes were wide, darting around the bay in terror. She looked at the guards, at the weapons, at the armored soldiers who were supposed to protect her. Then she looked at Kalen. Something shifted in her expression. The fear didn't disappear, but it changed direction. She stopped struggling. Her mouth opened. "You found me," she whispered. Everyone froze. Kalen stared at her. "What?" The princess pulled one arm free from the Praetorian's grip and pointed a trembling finger at Kalen's face. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice was clear as a bell in the dead silence of the docking bay. "Don't hurt him," she said. "He's my guardian." Commander Thraxus's confident expression cracked. The Praetorians exchanged uncertain glances, and Kalen Voss, bleeding on the deck with cuffs on his wrists, realized that his life had just become infinitely more complicated, and that somewhere in the darkness above, someone was probably celebrating. Because the princess had just told the truth. And the truth was going to get them all killed. The interrogation chamber of the Zalothian citadel had not been designed for comfort. It had been designed for confession. Kalen had been strapped to a metal chair for 6 hours. His wrists were raw where the restraints had bitten through his skin. A single beam of actinic light stabbed down from the ceiling, catching every drop of sweat that rolled down his face. Across from him, invisible in the darkness, a panel of 5 judges studied his every micro-expression. He had told them the same thing 37 times. I did not take the princess. I have never seen the princess. I don't know how she got on my ship. And 37 times, they had called him a liar. Commander Thraxus circled the chair like a predator evaluating wounded prey. His clawed feet clicked against the obsidian floor. Your biosignature is on her clothing. Your scent is in her hair. You carried her, human. For how long? A day? 2. Kalen closed his eyes. He remembered the first time he'd actually seen the princess, not in the docking bay, but in the footage the tribunal had shown him. A grainy security recording from 3 nights ago. The wandering star had been in orbital storage while Kalen negotiated a trade deal. The footage showed a small figure sneaking through the maintenance shafts, crawling up the loading ramp, disappearing inside his ship. She'd hidden there for 2 days. 2 days while he flew cargo runs. 2 days while she survived on ration bars and recycled water, alone in the dark. He hadn't known, but no one believed that. I didn't carry her, Kalen said, his voice hoarse. I never touched her until your guards tackled me. A child does not become attached to a stranger without contact. Thraxus stopped in front of the chair, leaning close enough that Kalen could see the individual scales on his face. What did you do to her, human? What methods did you use to turn her loyalty? The question made Kalen's blood boil. She's a child. Children get scared. They latch onto whoever seems safe. Maybe she was just looking for someone who wasn't pointing a weapon at her face. The judges murmured. Thraxus's eye twitched. The human insults this court. One of the judges said, an ancient female with a voice like grinding stones. He mocks our security, our honor. Your security failed, Kalen shot back. Someone put that child on my ship. Someone wanted her gone. And instead of finding the real threat, you're wasting time torturing a cargo hauler who just wanted to deliver medicine to refugees. The chamber went silent. Thraxus straightened slowly. His expression had changed not to anger but to something colder. Calculation. Bring the princess. The door hissed open. Kalen's heart hammered against his ribs as 2 attendants led Princess Alara into the room. She had been cleaned up, her torn robes replaced with a simple white tunic. But her eyes were still red from crying, and she moved with the hesitant shuffle of a child who had learned not to trust adults. She looked tiny in the vast chamber. Fragile. The kind of fragile that made Kalen want to put himself between her and the darkness. Princess, Thraxus said, kneeling to her level, his voice softened. Do you know this human? Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on Kalen's face. Did he take you from your room? Silence, Kalen held his breath. No. Thraxus's jaw tightened. Did he hurt you? No. Then how did you come to be on his ship? The princess's lower lip trembled. She looked at the judges, at the guards, at the cold metal walls that surrounded her. Then she looked at Kalen, really looked at him, and something broke open in her small chest. There were bad men, she whispered. In the walls, they hurt the blue soldiers. They were looking for me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I ran so far, and then I found a place where it was dark and warm and it smelled like. She stopped, swallowed. Like the nice man who gave me food and didn't ask questions. Kalen felt his throat close up. He hadn't known she was there, but she had known. She had watched him from the shadows of his own cargo bay, seen him work, heard him hum old Earth songs while he repaired his engines. and she had decided, somehow, impossibly, that he was safe. Thraxus stood up. His face was a mask, but his hands trembled. The princess is traumatized. Her testimony cannot be. "Let me go," Alara said. Everyone turned. She walked forward, past Thraxus, past the guards, past every protocol and procedure that governed the Xylothian royal household. She walked until she stood directly in front of Kaelin's chair, close enough that he could have touched her if his hands were free. "Let him go," she repeated. "He didn't do anything wrong. He was just being good." She reached up and placed her small hand on his cheek. "Like my father says I should be." Somewhere in the darkness above the citadel, the assassins were already moving, and Kaelin Voss realized that the princess's love might be the only thing keeping him alive, and the only reason someone wanted them both dead. The recordings were found in the Wandering Star's damaged nav computer. Technician Velax hadn't been looking for evidence. She'd been tasked with reconstructing the ship's flight path, hopping to prove the human had traveled to known pirate havens. Instead, she found something else. A continuous recording from the ship's internal sensors, motion-activated, automatically archived, that had been running for the entire 3 days the princess had been aboard. The tribunal watched in stunned silence. The first image showed the cargo bay at 3:47 hours. Dark, silent. Then a tiny figure crept across the floor, bare feet slapping softly against metal grating. Princess Alara, her royal crest dimmed to near invisibility, her eyes wide and desperate. She found a stack of empty cargo crates and crawled inside the largest one, pulling a torn thermal blanket over herself. She stayed there for 14 hours. The next morning, Kaelin Voss entered the cargo bay whistling. He was older than he looked in person, mid-40s, with graying temples and the kind of scars that came from a hard life. He hummed something tuneless while he checked inventory, his movements efficient and unbothered. At one point, he walked within 3 feet of the crate where Alara hid. He didn't see her, but he did something else. He left a ration bar on a nearby shelf. "No," Thraxus said, watching the playback. That's not abandonment. He knew she was there. He was feeding her." Technician Velax shook her head. "Look at his eyes, Commander. He's not looking at the crate. He's not looking anywhere near it. He left that ration bar out of habit. His logs show he always keeps emergency supplies in accessible locations." The recording continued through the day. Kaelin came and went. He never approached the crate. He never spoke to the princess. He never acknowledged her existence at all because he genuinely didn't know she existed. But then came the second night. The ship's internal temperature dropped to near freezing when the heating system malfunctioned, a known issue with older human vessels, according to the logs. Kaelin spent an hour trying to fix it, cursing in languages the translator struggled with. Then he gave up, grabbed his own thermal blanket, and curled up in the pilot's chair to sleep. The recording showed Alara leaving her crate at 2:21 hours. She was shivering violently, her breath fogging in the cold air. She crept through the cargo bay, up the corridor, into the cockpit. And she stopped at the pilot's chair. Kaelin was asleep. His face was slack, peaceful in a way it never seemed to be when he was awake. The princess stood there for a long time, watching him breathe. Then, slowly, carefully, she pulled the edge of his thermal blanket over her own small shoulders and curled up on the floor beside his chair. She slept there until morning. "Activate audio," one of the judges whispered. The recording shifted. Dawn, Kaelin woke first. He sat up, stretched, looked down. And froze. The footage showed his face in perfect clarity. Confusion, alarm, then something else. Something that made the judges lean forward in their seats. Kaelin's expression softened. He didn't scream. He didn't grab her. He didn't call for help. He looked at the sleeping child for 30 full seconds. Then he took his blanket, the only source of warmth in the ship, and draped it entirely over her small body. He went back to work in the cold. Keep watching, Velek said quietly. The next 3 days unfolded in fragments. Kalen never acknowledged the princess directly, but his behavior changed. Ration bars appeared more frequently. The ship's temperature was fixed suspiciously fast. A child-sized blanket showed up in the cargo bay, draped over a crate like an offering. And on the third day, when Alara finally emerged from hiding, when she stood trembling in the middle of the cargo bay, waiting to be discovered, Kalen walked past her, picked up his tools, and said exactly one sentence. "You don't have to be scared anymore." That was when the palace guards had stormed the docking bay. That was when they had found the princess on the human ship, clinging to his leg, crying out that she didn't want to leave. The recording ended. The tribunal chamber was completely silent. Commander Thraxus stood with his claws digging into his own palms, his face ashen. One of the judges had begun to weep. "He didn't know her," Velek said. "He never spoke to her, he never touched her. But when she came to him, when she chose him, he protected her without hesitation. From the cold, from hunger, from fear." She turned to face the tribunal. "The human didn't kidnap the princess. The princess found a guardian, and he never asked for anything in return." Somewhere in the shadows at the back of the chamber, a courtier in royal livery slipped out the door and activated a hidden communicator. The assassins had been delayed. But they had not been stopped. The revelation of the recordings should have ended the matter. It did not. 3 hours after the tribunal adjourned, the royal court fractured. Two factions emerged, each more entrenched than the last. The traditionalists, led by High Chancellor Vorn, a politician with ambitions that extended far beyond his station, argued that Kalen's ignorance of the princess's presence was irrelevant. A human had harbored the heir to the throne without authorization. If that was allowed to stand, what message did it send? "The child's safety is paramount," Vorn declared, his voice echoing through the throne room. "This human is a variable we cannot control, an unknown, and unknowns are threats." Across the aisle, Ambassador Silene of the diplomatic corps stood alone, her voice sharp as a blade. "The child is alive because of him. She is unharmed because of him. She trusts him because of him. And you want to execute that man. In what universe does that serve the throne?" The room erupted. Arguments flew like plasma bolts. Ministers shouted over ministers. The royal guard stood at attention, their faces impassive, but their hands rested on their weapons. And through it all, Kalen sat in a holding cell beneath the palace, counting the seconds on his watch and wondering how long it would take for the assassins to finish the job. They came for him at midnight. Not the assassins. Not yet. Instead, the cell door opened to reveal Princess Alara, barefoot and determined, with a single guard trailing helplessly behind her. "You have to get up," she said. Kalen blinked. "Princess, you shouldn't be. They're going to hurt you. I heard them talking, the man with the white scales and the angry voice. He said you're too dangerous to keep alive." She grabbed his hand through the bars. "So you have to come with me." Kalen stared at her. She was so small, so earnest, so utterly convinced that her love could move mountains. "I can't, kid," he said softly. "If I run, they'll say I'm guilty. If you stay, they'll kill you anyway." She wasn't wrong. Kalen had been around enough political systems to know how this worked. He was a convenient scapegoat, a foreigner with no allies, no resources, no voice. Executing him would make the traditionalists look strong without requiring them to admit their own security failures. But running would give them the excuse they needed. "I need you to listen to me," Kalen said, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Whatever happens, you stay with your guards, you stay where it's safe. You do not come looking for me. Do you understand?" Alara's face crumpled. "But you saved me." "You saved yourself," he said. "You found a dark place and you stayed quiet and you survived. That was all you. I just kept the lights on." The little princess shook her head violently. "No, no, you were warm, you were kind. You made the scary noises stop. She grabbed the bars of his cell, her knuckles white. I don't want you to go away. Kalen closed his eyes. He thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 23 now, grown with her own life and her own problems. He hadn't seen her in 5 years. The guilt of that stretched across light years. Sometimes, he said, people have to go away, but that doesn't mean they stop caring about you. A sound echoed through the corridor. Boots, many boots coming fast. The guard who had accompanied Alara cursed and grabbed her arm. Your Highness, we must go, now. No. The boots grew louder. Kalen could see the shadows now, at least a dozen figures moving with military precision. But they weren't wearing Royal Guard uniforms. They were wearing black, featureless, faceless. Assassins. Run, Kalen roared. The guard yanked Alara back from the cell. She screamed, reaching for Kalen as the black-clad figures rounded the corner. Plasma bolts lit the corridor. The guard returned fire, shoving the princess behind him. She stumbled, fell, scrambled to her feet, and ran back to the cell. Open it, she shrieked at the lock. Open it. Kalen slammed his hands against the bars. Go, Alara, Go. The assassins advanced. The guard fell, and the little princess, with tears streaming down her face, looked at the man who had been kind to her in the dark and made a choice that would change everything. She pressed her palm against the biolock. The cell door slid open. Part 5. The Assassin RETORNS. Kalen moved before his brain caught up with his body. He burst from the cell, scooped Alara into his arms, and dove behind a support column as plasma bolts shredded the air where they'd been standing. The heat scorched his back. The princess screamed against his chest, her small body shaking violently. Stay down, he growled. Eyes closed, don't look up. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have armor. He didn't have anything except a lifetime of surviving situations where he should have died. His father had taught him that most fights were lost before the first punch, not because of strength, but because of fear. So he stopped being afraid. The first assassin came around the column too fast, expecting a cowering victim. Kalen met him with an elbow to the throat and a knee to the groin, then ripped the plasma pistol from his grip before he hit the ground. The weapon felt wrong in his hand, too light, too efficient, but it fired when he pulled the trigger. The second assassin dropped. Then the third. Then Kalen was running, Alara clutched against his chest, plasma bolts singing past his ears. The corridor twisted ahead of him, unfamiliar and endless. He had no idea where he was going. He only knew he couldn't stop. Left, Alara shouted. He turned left. Right, now right. He turned right. She guided him through the labyrinth of the palace with the instinct of a child who had grown up in its shadows. They burst into a kitchen, a laundry, a storage room filled with ceremonial armor that hadn't been touched in centuries. Behind them, the assassin's boots echoed closer. Where are the guards? Kalen gasped. Father sent them away. He didn't want anyone to see the argument. Alara's voice was small but steady. He didn't know about the bad men. Of course he didn't. No one ever knew about the bad men until it was too late. They reached a dead end, an observation deck overlooking the palace gardens, 60 meters below. Kalen slammed his palm against the glass, searching for a latch, a handle, anything. The assassins poured through the doorway behind them. 8 of them, plasma rifles raised, faces hidden behind featureless black helmets. Human, one of them said, step away from the child. Kalen turned slowly, placing himself between the princess and the guns. His heart pounded against his ribs. His hands trembled, but his voice was calm when he spoke. You're going to kill a 6-year-old in front of her own palace, and you think the throne is just going to let that slide? The throne will blame you, the assassin replied. A desperate human caught with the princess, a struggle, a tragic accident. He raised his rifle. You should have let us kill you in the cell. Kaelin looked down at Alara. She was watching him with those huge violet eyes, tears still wet on her cheeks but something else in her expression now. Trust. Complete, absolute trust. He smiled at her. "Close your eyes, kid." She didn't. The assassins fired. And Kaelin Voss, cargo hauler, failed father, accidental guardian, threw himself forward, not away from the bolts, into them. He wrapped his body around the princess's small frame and took the full force of the blast across his back. The pain was like nothing he had ever experienced. White, atomic, every nerve in his body screamed at once. He hit the ground with Alara beneath him, his vision swimming, his breath coming in wet, ragged gasps. He couldn't move. But he could hear. He heard the assassins approaching. He heard their boots stop just inches from his head. He heard the leader's voice, cold and clinical. "The child first, then confirm the human." A small hand found his, squeezed. And then the entire deck shook with the thunder of incoming ships. The Royal Guard had arrived. Kaelin woke to the smell of antiseptic and the sound of someone crying. He tried to open his eyes. The lights were too bright. He tried to move. His body refused. He tried to speak. His throat produced only a rasping wheeze. "He's awake," a voice said. "Get the queen." The crying stopped. A small weight settled on his chest, gentle, careful, like a bird landing on a branch. Alara. Her face floated into his blurred vision, streaked with tears but beaming with relief. "You're alive," she whispered. "I told them you would be." Kaelin managed a smile. "Told you, tough to kill." The details came back in fragments. The assassins had been captured, all except the leader, who had taken his own life before interrogation. The conspiracy went higher than anyone had anticipated. 3 ministers had been arrested. Commander Thraxus had been revealed as an unwitting pawn, used by traditionalists who wanted the princess dead to trigger a succession crisis. And Kaelin Voss had been unconscious for 11 days. The palace medical wing was far nicer than any hospital he'd ever been in. Private room, silk sheets, a view of the royal gardens that probably cost more than his ship. But he noticed the restraints on his bed rails, not to hold him down, but to keep him from rolling onto his injured back. "You took 3 plasma bolts," a doctor informed him, her scales tinged with professional admiration. "Your species has remarkable resilience. A Xylothian would have died instantly." "Humans are stubborn," Kaelin rasped. "It's a character flaw." The queen came to see him that evening. She was smaller than he expected, shorter than her own daughter, her silver scales dimmed with age and grief. But her eyes held the weight of absolute authority. She dismissed the guards, dismissed the attendants, and sat down in the chair beside his bed like she was visiting an old friend. "My daughter speaks of you constantly," the queen said. "She tells me you smelled like coffee and engine grease. She tells me you sang songs in a language she didn't understand. She tells me you made her feel safe when she had forgotten what safety felt like." Kaelin looked away. "I didn't know she was there if I'd known." "If you'd known, you would have done exactly the same thing." The queen's voice was soft but certain. "You would have hidden her, protected her, given her your blanket and your food and your warmth, not because you wanted a reward, because that is who you are." He said nothing. There was nothing to say. "The assassins were sent by my own cousin," the queen continued. "He wanted the throne. He arranged for Alara to be hidden on a human vessel, hoping she would be lost in the chaos of interstellar trade. He did not anticipate that the human would be kind." A heavy silence settled between them. "I am going to make you an offer," the queen said finally. "It is not a command. It is not a political maneuver. It is a mother's request." Kaelin looked at her. "My daughter has seen too much darkness. She has lost her innocence, her security, her belief that adults will protect her." The queen's voice cracked. "But she believes in you. You are the only light she can still see." She reached out and took his hand. Stay not as a prisoner, not as a subject, stay as her guardian, her protector, her family. Tears spilled down the queen's scaled cheeks. She needs someone who will put her first, and you have already proven that you will. Kalen thought about his daughter on Earth, about the years he had missed, about the birthday parties he'd been absent for, the school plays he'd never seen, the tears he hadn't been there to wipe away. He thought about second chances. "Yes," he said quietly, "yes, I'll stay." The queen wept, and somewhere in the hallway, a small princess heard the answer and smiled for the first time in 11 days. 8 years later, the human walked through the royal palace without escort. He was older now, his hair fully gray, his face lined with experience and laughter. He wore a simple tunic in the royal colors, but no medals, no insignia, no marks of rank. He didn't need them. Everyone knew who he was. Kalen Voss, the Guardian. The title had been granted by royal decree on the day he'd been released from the medical wing. It carried no lands, no titles, no political power. It carried only one responsibility: the safety and happiness of Princess Alara Vel, heir to the Zalothian throne. He had taken that responsibility seriously. He had taught her to fight, to think, to question authority when authority was wrong. He had taught her that strength meant protecting the weak, not dominating them. He had taught her that humans were not the monsters the old propaganda claimed, that they were messy and complicated and wonderful and terrible, just like everyone else. And she had grown into a young woman that any parent would be proud of. Today, the palace hosted a delegation from the Andromeda Compact, a coalition of 14 species who had refused to recognize Zalothian sovereignty for decades. The negotiations had been tense. The delegates were arrogant, dismissive, convinced of their own superiority. Then the princess entered the throne room. She was 15 now, tall and graceful, her silver scales gleaming in the afternoon light. Her royal crest pulsed with quiet authority, but her eyes, those same violet eyes that had stared up at Kalen from a cargo crate, held a warmth that no amount of court training could manufacture. She walked past the diplomats, past the ministers, past the guards who had tried so hard to protect her 8 years ago. She walked to the human standing in the corner. "Guardian," she said formally. "Princess," he replied with a slight bow. The Andromeda delegates exchanged confused glances. They had heard rumors of the human who lived in the palace, but they had assumed he was a servant, a pet, a curiosity. They had not expected to see their diplomatic rival defer to a member of a species they considered primitive. One of the delegates, a hulking creature with 4 arms and an unfortunate amount of arrogance, stepped forward. "Your Highness, we were told that no off-worlders hold positions of authority in your court, and yet this human—" Alara turned to face him. Her smile did not reach her eyes. "This human," she said, "found me when I was lost. He fed me when I was hungry. He kept me warm when I was cold. He took plasma bolts for me without hesitation. He taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it." She placed her hand on Kalen's shoulder. "He is not a courtier. He is not a diplomat. He is not a soldier or a spy or a political appointee." Her voice rang through the throne room, clear and certain. "He is the reason I am alive to have this conversation." The Andromeda delegate shifted uncomfortably. "But what is he?" Alara looked at Kalen. He looked back at her, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended species, politics, and the vast distance between stars. She smiled. "He's my guardian, and guardians don't need titles." She turned back to the delegates, her expression shifting from warmth to steel. "Now, shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? Because unlike the humans you've been taught to fear, we Zalothians believe in second chances, but we don't believe in wasting them." The negotiations ended within the hour. And Kalen Voss, cargo hauler, failed father, accidental guardian, stood in the shadows of the throne room and watched the princess change the galaxy. He had never served in any military. He had never commanded a ship or led an army. He had never done anything more remarkable than be kind to a frightened child in the dark. But that, it turned out, was enough. Because somewhere in the vast, cold universe, a little girl had needed someone to care, and he had been there. And that made all the difference.